Okay, Tech Tuesday, number 10. Thank you for coming. Those of you who are younger recognize the picture on the left, the game of Frogger. And when we do IP, and especially when we talk about IPStrategy or make plans what we're going to file and when we're going to file, I think it's fair to ask if we live on the left or if we live on the right. Often when we see plans, it says we're going to file this patent now, and 3 months later we'll file a patent on this, and then we're going to have all of these patents, and it will be great protection, and the only way to get to the other side of the river is by infringing all of these patents. And the other possible way is looking at Frogger, where you know where you start from, you don't know where you're going to get to, you can get eaten on the way, you have things moving back and forth, and let's just make it short. I believe the world in which we work, especially in startup companies, we're like the game of Frogger. We don't know what the exact goal is. Even if we know what the goal is, we know there's several alternative goals. We don't know when opportunities or risks will happen. We need to move fast. A stepping stone turtle can suddenly sink, and the next frog will want to go a different way. There's alligators out there, meaning you might be infringing somebody's patent. And if I take this story to the extreme, which is really what today's short talk is about, it can be like crossing the Limpopo River, which unfortunately has a lot of crocodiles, indeed a lot of people trying to go from Zimbabwe into South Africa. And you cross it by jumping from one crocodile to the next, hoping that you'll get to the next crocodile before the first one either sinks or tries to eat you. And the question, and what I want to talk about today, obviously we file IP in order to protect one of these stepping stones out of the illusion that the competitor will also need to do that stepping stone. The question is, what does IP planning look like when we're actually playing a game of Frogger? And I'll put it this way. Last week, I talked about the window. There's some sort of window when your IP has value. And the question I'm asking, what do we do when the window for the value of the IP closes before it even opens? In order for IP to be good, we have this triangle. The IP should be in a usable state, let's say granted if you want to sue somebody. There should be somebody for you to use the IP against. In other words, if you have a granted patent, but there's nobody out there, no competitors, it's not very valuable. And somebody should care, that same somebody should care about the IP, otherwise they'll just stop using it. And we often write patents where we know that there's a good chance that the IP will never meet these requirements, meaning that by the time we get the patent, people won't care about it anymore. Or we can get the patent quickly, but we don't have any competition who will want to be infringing this patent. Now, you must be thinking to yourself, one of the values of a patent is to prevent competitors from coming in. Well, that is absolutely correct. And that's why I use these magic words for its purpose. In other words, if we want a patent which will keep people from going into our markets in the year 2026, it doesn't matter if nobody ever infringes it. The point is, it's not going to be coming in. Usually a patent has more than one purpose. For example, maybe we want to have a patent which is good for raising money, but also good for blocking the market when the market will actually exist. Sometimes, especially if you have an old patent, it will die by the time the market actually exists. I'll give you another variant. The IP is great. It's usable. There's somebody to use it against, and that somebody cares about it. but it's not the main market. It's not the $10 billion market. It's a $10 million market. So if somebody wants to enter into the $10 million market, they'll be infringing your patent. But the minute the market will grow, the patent won't be interesting. I'm not saying this isn't valuable, but what do we do? First of all, you should be aware that it can happen and happens often. Say a little bit more about this window that we want to be in. Is a window big or small in time? Why is that important? If the window is small, any one of the random things that happen, like a delay in funding, COVID delaying R&D by a year, can make the window become irrelevant. The next, maybe most important question, will have a window. The window will be from 2026 to 2029. That's what we believe. Will the company have money and other resources like manpower or whatever to take advantage of the window? Will you have money to prepare the IP so it will be ready for that window? Okay, if I need the windows then I have to file 5 patent applications now. Do you have money to do the R&D? Do you have money to file and prosecute? When we have a window, it usually has not only patents protecting it, but also know-how, trade secrets, somehow mixed together, protecting that window. So do you know what it is? And last but not least, when we talk about a window, I talked about we're predicting that in the year 2026, we'll need a patent on something. Is this window a real window or an imagined window? In other words, do you actually have, or will you actually have IP on a feature, for example, with critical uniqueness? Critical means that everybody has to do that feature or something like it. And uniqueness means that there are no alternatives. If there are alternatives, so no value. And of course, it has to have a meaningful competitive advantage. We've all seen patents which are unique and special and protect your way of doing it, but guess what? It's a completely different way of doing it. So not only am I telling you sometimes a window will close before it opens, I'm asking you if the window actually even exists. You got to think about that window. So here are a few things in our world that cause this to happen. The first one is Red Queen syndrome. In Red Queen syndrome, you have to run quickly just to stand in place. And you have to run twice as fast as you can to get somewhere else. So if the market is changing quickly, like in AI today, in large language models and applications, if you stand still, you're dead. You have to innovate all the time because of other people. But it also means that because everybody's innovating all the time, anything you invent now might not have any value by the time you get to market, or it might not be granted, but when it still has value. Classic Limpopo. In order to actually build your product, you have stage 1. I'll call it scaffolding. So we have clients that say, I'll build phase 1, which is an implanted device which collects information. And then I'll use that information in order to design stage 2, which has a market 20 times bigger, which is a non-implanted device. Or in computers right now, it's exactly the same thing. What is OpenAI doing? They're doing stage 1. They're giving ChatGPT for free in order to collect data about what is the right way to use it and what to use it for. And they're definitely tracking applications. And stage 2 will be filing patents on those applications and how the interface should be used for those other more valuable applications. So even if OpenAI wanted to file a patent on the chat interface, it's not clear if that patent will ever have a window. Another situation, I call it horizons. We can only see what we can see. And the examples that I really like is bariatric surgery. You know, when you have cut away part of your stomach or part of your GI or staple it in order to lose weight. and it works for some people. And it was discovered that the main reason why it works is not because you can prevent the body from absorbing food, you can't do that, but it causes the body to change the hormones that it puts out, and it makes people less hungry, so they don't eat. Obviously, we can identify these hormones and generate an implant which will only give out these hormones, a little piece of plastic with that you inject with a needle. And people have done that, which means that in a few years, there'll be no reason to do this very dangerous surgery when you can get all of the benefits and perhaps more using a needle. So any IPs that you had on doing the surgery had a very short window. The window was from when people agreed that it's a good idea to do it until when people agreed that there's a much better way to do it. And we work in innovation, there's always a better way to do it. Now, some of you are working in computers. The better way to do it will appear in a year. Some of you are working in pharma. The better way to do it might appear in 10 years. In medical devices, we have an intermediate window, let's say 5 to 7 years. The last cause of this thing is the Clayton situation. You have a company, it's optimized for selling a product. You develop in your company a competing product. You're not going to get the resources to develop the cannibalizing product as long as the main company is making money on what they're selling. They're not going to let you do it. And when they suddenly decide to do the changeover, it could be too late. Like what people say happened to Kodak. Remember, Kodak invented the digital camera. And they knew it was valuable. But it didn't fit into their model of film. And guess what? The market for digital cameras on cell phones is way bigger than the market for film ever was. So I like context, and here's some context we might want to think about. If you expect your competitors, and this context depends on, what your world looks like. If you expect your competitors to copy you, then it's much easier to write IP because they're going to copy you. And if you always have a patent on what you're doing, even if it's only a design patent, your competitor is copying you and you catch them. Sometimes you already know what stage 2 is going to be, but you don't have to file the patent on it now. You can file the patent later. And if you file the patent later, it will last longer and you might be able to align the window of the patent with when it has value. The problem is, and you might be thinking 20 years is a very long time, but in some countries like China, people like, also in Germany, people like filing design utility models, which have a much shorter lifetime, but you can file more of them and they're cheaper and easier to get. Here the problem is, if you don't file, your competitor might preempt you. Can you prevent the competitor from figuring out what phase 2 is going to be? Here's another problem, context. Who is more flexible, IP or R&D? Because if you think back to the game Frogger, the frog has to jump from one place to another. Can you predict where the next place will be? Predict means either the IP people, with the help of the R&D people, say, we don't know what next is going to be, but either A or B or C. So we can file a patent now and it'll be ready in time for the window. But sometimes the R&D is more flexible. They change their design faster than the patent attorney can keep up. And then you automatically get into the situation where none of the patents you filed are any good because the R&D keeps changing it. When you get closer to product market fit, something very interesting happens. The ideas get smaller, but the stakes get higher. The ideas get smaller because you're taking an existing product and making small changes in it. The stakes get higher because now there's a real market and real competitors and real money coming in. Unfortunately, your own history starts catching up with you. Your previous patent application and usage in the market starts publishing, and it's being used against your new patents. Now, to somehow give you a metaphor, I don't know if you're familiar with Stuart Brand. He built this pace layers model. How fast do things change? So nature apparently doesn't change very quickly. Culture faster, governance faster, infrastructure faster, commerce faster, and fashion crazy. As you might guess, the question is, your IP, is it directed here or is it directed here? Are you on nature or are you on fashion? The best situation is obviously to be on nature. Now, these layers don't exactly map to the layers that we have in our world. That's for different talk. So I had some ideas what you might be able to do, and these are only general suggestions. The most important thing to do is to know that this will happen. First, you should manage your history so it can't be used against you to the extent you can. You should try to keep a thread alive in a patent family. And one of the reasons is because people, even though they have new ideas and they change what they're doing, they usually maintain or riff on the previous ideas. If they have new scientific discoveries, no, but you try to reach down in the layers. So talking about client needs, sometimes client needs are more stable than technology, and sometimes technology is more stable than client needs. So whichever is more stable, that's where you want to get your patent. You should plan, and that also means select when your windows are going to be. And if we're talking about a Limpopo situation, you should select your windows to be later. In other words, you should be able to show people that you will have valid and useful IP 5 years down the road, not 1 year down the road. Your portfolio of patents should include not only a plan, like those cute stepping stones crossing the river, but also something about positioning. So you're flexible and you can move around. Problems, significant problems, often change more slowly. So you should try to protect these problems. Be lucky. I said you can expect things to change, but sometimes it won't change. And in that 10% of the cases where they don't change, you can have good IP. And last but not least, I've mentioned FUD before. Okay, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. When somebody wants to compete with you, they're worried. If you have a patent, they don't know how quickly technology is moving. They don't know that the patent will be obsolete by the time you get to the market. They're scared. Well, some of them don't know, and some of them do know. Let me tell you a story. I gave you bariatric surgery, but here's with numbers. So how do you implant a new heart valve, aortic valve? There's two ways, surgical and TAVI. Surgical, we cut you open, we mess around inside. TAVI, we put it on a catheter. And we can either put on a catheter through a blood vessel or what's called transapical, which means we stab you through the chest with a catheter of some kind. Okay, in 2010, there was a study that TAVI is better than surgery. Okay, this line is better than this line. In 2016, there was a follow-on study which said the transapical, stabbing you in the chest, is not as good as transfemoral. Okay, 4 years. Now look at the numbers. These are transapical, and these are transfemoral of some type. In 2011, it was 27 to 72. Not bad. In 2015, it was 6 to 94. That's it. Any patents you had on transapical, that was their window. Now, the year is 2002. They just did the first in human, TAVI. Your company wants to enter the field. You know it's going to take 10 years to get FDA approval. Okay, these are percentages, not numbers. The numbers go like that. What do? Okay, these numbers are all true. And with that, I will stop the recording.